What you need to know about SD cards. I'm Huey Poplock. An SD card is a small, portable memory storage device used in digital devices such as cameras, smartphones, tablets, and more. It provides a convenient way to store and transfer data such as photos, videos, music, documents, and other files. SD cards come in various sizes and capacities, and they use flash memory technology to store data. They are compatible with a wide range of devices and can be easily removed and replaced. SD cards are also available in different types, such as SD, SDHC, and SDXC, each with a different capacity limit. Additionally, SD cards can be protected by a password or encrypted for increased security. An SD card, short for Secure Digital Card, is a type of small, portable memory card that is commonly used in digital cameras, smartphones, and other electronic devices to store data such as photos, videos, music, and documents. SD cards are available in a variety of capacities, ranging from a few gigabytes to several terabytes. They are also available in different physical sizes, including standard SD, mini SD, and micro SD. SD cards use flash memory technology, which allows them to retain data even when the power is turned off. They also have built-in security features to protect against unauthorized access and data corruption. SD cards are the most common memory card type used in digital cameras. Having been around for more than 20 years, this type of camera memory card is readily available, relatively cheap, and capable of performing well enough in cameras designated for beginners right through to professional users. There are several factors to consider when comparing SD cards, including capacity, speed, and durability. By capacity, that refers to the amount of storage space on the card, measured in gigabytes. Higher capacity cards can store more data, but they also tend to be more expensive. Speed is another important factor to consider. SD cards have different speed class ratings, such as Class 4 or Class 10, which indicate the minimum write speed of the card. A higher speed class rating means the card can write data faster, which is important for things like recording high-definition video. Durability is another important consideration. SD cards can be susceptible to damage from water, heat, and other environmental factors. Some cards are designed to be more durable than others, with features like waterproofing and shock resistance. Overall, the choice of SD card will depend on the specific needs of the user. If you need a higher capacity, fast, and durable card, you may want to consider a high-end SD card with a high-speed class rating and durability features. Here are the various values on an SD card. The speed of an SD card is determined by a number of factors, including the technology used in the card, the capacity of the card, and the SD card speed class. The SD card speed class is a rating system that indicates the minimum guaranteed write speed of the card. The speed classes are 2, 4, 6, and 10. UHS 1 Speed Class 1, UHS 1 Speed Class 3, and UHS 2 Speed Class 1 and 3. The read speed of an SD card is usually much faster than the write speed. A card with a high read speed would be good for transferring large files quickly, while a card with a high write speed would be good for recording video or taking a lot of photos in quick succession. Although the physical size and shape of the SD card have not changed since its launch in 1999, the format internal specifications have gone through several iterations. Flash memory technology has also evolved, delivering improved reliability and significantly increased speeds. The improvements are welcome, but it has created a problem. The continuous evolution of SD card standards has given birth to a host of symbols and classes used to describe the type of SD card and its speed. It's not uncommon to find an SD card marked with 6 or 7 different symbols, making it difficult for people to understand precisely what they are buying. I'm trying to demystify these symbols and ensure you know what you're buying and whether it's suitable for your camera or whatever device you're using. Some memory card manufacturers quote SD card speed in megabytes per second, while others, such as Lexar, prefer to quote a speed factor like 1000x. This is confusing for the consumer because it makes it harder to compare SD card speeds between the two brands. This speed factor naming scheme is a hangover from the days of CD-ROM drives, where the standard drive read CDs at 150 kilobytes per second. Therefore, 1x is equal to 150 kilobytes per second, and 1000x is equal to 150 megabytes per second. Isn't that ridiculous? In an era where some photographers are of an age where they won't even know what a CD-ROM drive is, a few brands use their speed to gauge modern flash memory speeds. This idiotic practice of quoting SD card speeds based on speeds of CD-ROM drives appears to have stopped with the advent of CF Express cards. An SD card class is simply a way to define the minimum continuous write speed of the card. This is not a maximum peak speed, but an actual minimum continuous write speed that any device, camera or not, can count on having available with any SD card. This minimum continuous write speed is critical because if your camera shoots 4K or 8K video, you need to use a card at the very least delivers a minimum continuous write speed fast enough to record those formats. The complication is that the SD Card Association has changed how they represent sustained minimum write speed 3 times. They started calling cards Class 2, Class 6, or Class 10, by which they meant that they were capable of a minimum sustained write speed of 2 megabytes per second, 6 megabytes per second, or 10 megabytes per second. Then they decided that this was too many letters to write on the SD card, so they changed it to use the USD card class standard, and things took the form of a U1 and U3. In these examples, U1 corresponds to a minimum sustained speed of 10 megabytes per second, and U3 is 30 megabytes per second. Essentially, divide by 10 and stick a U in front of it. While I agree that writing U1 on a card is easier than writing Class 10, both have the same 10 megabytes per second specification, the problem is that SD card manufacturers just started to put them both on the card. In their eyes, the more symbols on a card equals better. Unfortunately, it even gets dumber because we now see the card manufacturers putting completely extraneous symbols on SD cards. For example, they all carry the C10 Class 10 symbol and the U3 symbol. U3 guarantees a minimum write speed of 30 megabytes per second, and the C10 guarantees 10 megabytes per second. Naturally, you cannot reach U3 standards without it also delivering C10 standards. It's common sense. But card manufacturers insist on adding the extra symbol for fear that a competitor's card might look better if it were to carry the symbol, whether their card did not. If you thought this couldn't get worse, you're wrong. To confuse the issue even more, the U standard was swapped for the V standard. Now we have V30, V60, and V90 SD cards that guarantee a minimum sustained write speeds, you guessed it, 30 megabytes per second, 60 megabytes per second, and 90 megabytes per second. And sure enough, these symbols are stuck onto the cards alongside all of the other ones. The result is a cluttered mess that is confusing for consumers. So let's simplify things. Here's a chart that helps you. If a card carries a V30, a V60, or V90 symbol, this is the only speed-related symbol you need to pay attention to. All of the U classes and Class 10 nonsense are meaningless. Any card with a V30, a V60, or V90 class will automatically pass all of the other SD card class standards below it. These days, following this simple guide will allow you to determine the relative speeds of 95% of the SD cards on the market. And it's more likely the manufacturer of your camera will have specified a minimum write speed in the manual or online specifications of either V30, V60, or V90. Another SD card performance indicator is whether the card uses the UHS, the ultra high speed bus, 1 or 2 configuration. The UHS 1 cards are limited to a theoretical maximum speed of 104 megabytes per second and are cheaper to manufacture. The UHS2 SD cards are faster and theoretically capable of reaching speeds of up to 312 megabytes per second. And you'll see the example. The UHS1 card is on the left, and the UHS2 card is on the right. There are two ways to distinguish between the UHS1 and UHS2 SD cards. Firstly, the card will either have "and" or "all" marked on the front. Usually this symbol will be marked alongside the type of SD card. For example, it might say SDHC2 or SDXC1. Secondly, unlike the other SD card performance differentiators, such as U or V speed class, there is also a physical difference between the UH1 and UH2. Looking at the back of the SD card, a UH1 card will have a single row of metal contacts, whereas a UHS2 card will have 2 rows. Let's go back one slide to see that, so you can visualize that. And here's a chart of the UHS speed classes for SD cards and their minimum write speeds. These are minimum speeds, and actual performance can vary depending upon factors such as a specific card and the device it's being used in. Also, keep in mind that the UHS2 cards are backward compatible with the UHS1 devices, but they will operate at the lower UHS1 speeds and require a UHS2 compatible device to take advantage of their higher speeds. There is a certain amount of backward compatibility between the UHS1 and UHS2. You can use either card type in any camera or SD card reader that accepts an SD card. The critical thing to understand is that both the devices and the SD card must be UHS2 compatible if you want to unlock the additional speed benefits of the UHS2 interface. If you put a faster and more expensive UHS2 SD card into a camera or card reader that is only rated for UHS1, the card will be limited to the UHS1 speed of 104 megabytes per second. Or if you use a cheaper UHS1 SD card and a more expensive UHS2 card reader, your photos will still download at the slower speed delivered by UHS1. If your camera is only rated to UHS1, you might not see the in-camera speed benefits of buying a more expensive UHS2 SD card. However, it may be a worthwhile investment if you want to speed up your image ingestion and editing workflow. After a long day of shooting to a high-capacity SD card, such as 128 gigabytes, 256 gigabytes, or even 512 gigabytes, having a UHS-2 card and card reader still save you upwards of 20 to 30 minutes of downloading time. Another point of confusion that often arises while discussing or researching memory card or hard drive speeds is the bits and bytes. Capital M, capital B per second means megabytes per second. Capital M, small b slash s means megabits per second. Sometimes these are also written as capital M, capital B, PS, and capital M, small b, PS, to confuse things even further. The SD, SDHC, SDXC, and SDUC, and their sizes. As you can see in the last slide, from a consumer standpoint, the primary difference between SD, SDHC, SDXC, and SDUC cards is the potential capacity. Although we call all of these cards SD cards, it's scarce to see an SD card on the market anymore. Technically, they died out more than a decade ago. Most of the time, you see SDHC cards if it has a capacity below 64 gigabytes, or SDXC cards if they have a capacity above 64 gigabytes. As for SDUC, although the standard exists, you probably have never seen one for sale, so it's safe to ignore that type of SD card for now. Plain old SD cards aren't sold anymore, and you are likely not to see an SDUC card either, which means that most cameras that have been built since 2010, and indeed all cameras made since around 2015, have SD card slots that'll work just fine with the two types of SD cards you'll find in the store shelves, SDHC and SDXC. In the end, out of all the little symbols that are stamped on an SD card, this one perhaps is the least important. Just get the SD card capacity that's right for you and double check that your camera will support it. The answer will then be yes for 99.9% of you. Micro SD cards are much smaller than SD cards, but you can use them in place of an SD card when combined with a micro SD to SD card adapter. These adapters look like regular SD card, but they have a tiny slot in them which you can insert the micro SD card. These adapters are cheap and readily available at most electronics retailers. In some cases, they're included with the micro SD card. Here's the identifying pieces of the SD card. Here is the speed classes, the UHS speed class, and the recommended speeds. Here's some of my SD cards. And I have an SD card holder that holds both the micro SD card and a regular size SD card, or their adapters. These are SD card readers in a computer. They could be a micro SD card or a regular SD card. This is an SD card reader if you don't have an SD slot in your computer. So, this has been what you need to know about SD cards. I'm Huey Poplock.